I'm not the creator.
Hi, I'm Joe Iconis.
And I'm Jennifer Ashley Tepper, and you are listening to Album Podcast on the Broadway Podcast Network.
Today we're going to be talking about Last on Land, which is a song that I wrote for Blood Song of Love and is the penultimate song on album. It features a massive choir arrangement by Joel Wagner, and on this episode we'll talk about the musical stories behind Last on Land, as well as the origin of it back when Blood Song of Love was first coming together.
It's a very fun episode. I hear all about the evolution of Last on Land from 2009, actually, up until 2023, all of the iterations and all of the various forms it's taken.
No, I'd never last on land. I would never last on land. Oh, heave ho. No one else would understand. I would never last on land.
Well, we're almost at the end of this massive album and thus this massive album podcast, and we've arrived at Last on Land.
Which makes sense because Last on Land is, as in addition to being the second to last song on the album, often near the end of an Iconis and Family concert.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like the group 11 o'clock number.
Mm-hmm. One of them,
yeah. Yeah. Last on Land, much like Find the Bastard, was written for Blood Song of Love.
This is one of your only songs where I truly remember where I was when I heard it for the first time, because you wrote it before Blood Song of Love, went into production.
Mm-hmm.
It was that year prior, and we were doing an Iconis and Family gig that you put this song in. And I remember my little sister, who was then in high school, was visiting, and I was like, "Oh my God, Joe just sent a new Joe Iconis song via email. We have to listen to it." And we sat on my old couch and we listened to Last on Land for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my God, I cannot imagine what this is going to sound like with everyone singing it." And, it's been so many years of it being a tradition since then.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember sending it to you too, in 2009.
Very special song. Also, like, a song that means a lot to a lot of people. Both, I hear a lot from people who have had a history with the family since Blood Song of Love, and know about this song in context, and it really means a lot to them. And then also people who really respond to this song in concert. I would say it's like a favorite of a lot of audience members.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I feel like it's one of those songs that it's so tied. The lyric is so tied to the context of it in the show, but I think it also works equally as well being completely removed from the context of the show. It's like, I feel like when people hear it in concert and don't even know that it came from Blood Song of Love, it still completely works as its own 5.5 minute experience. But for anyone who's curious, who doesn't know Blood Song, the context of it is that so Blood Song is about the musician who is the fella who sings Find the Bastard, and the whole show he's on this quest to get to Santa Violetta, who has been captured by the Cocodrillo. And it's the whole, even though it's like his mission is to be reunited with her, there's so much of it that's about him following his path as a musician, as an artist, and staying true to himself. And so it's all kind of like a big metaphor for that, for an artist who's trying to like remain true to himself in a world that makes it really hard to do that. And so in the second act, a musician and his sidekick Banana are asleep in the desert, and a thief comes in the night and steals the musician's guitar. And with his guitar gone, he feels at a loss. And it's sort of like the ultimate, he's been kicked when he's down. He's been on this big journey, and now his music has literally been stolen from him. And he just wanders the desert, and he wanders and he wanders, and he stumbles upon this strange man who's building a boat in the middle of the desert. And Last on Land is the song that the strange man sings.
Mm-hmm. And it had such a beautiful physical production. Like, for those that didn't get to see it at Ars Nova, like, what do you remember about when the song was happening in its premiere production?
Yeah, like Blood Song at Ars Nova, it was it was really scrappy, but it was like a show that, there was lots of wood and like decaying neon signs, and it was a show that was just like filthy. There was
Mhm.
like dirt and blood, and as I think we've talked about on the podcast, Bloody Marys being poured all over the stage. There was just liquid. There's just so much like stuff. It looked like it had like a very sort of like junk shop of the damned aesthetic to it. But Last on Land was this sort of moment of purity and beauty in the midst of all that. And the cast, who they weren't called the ensemble, they were called the Outlaws in the show. The Outlaws came together during the staging and basically constructed this sort of abstracted vision of a ship in the middle of the desert. In this movement by Jen Warner and John Simpkins that was really lyrical and was really different than anything else in the show, and so it sort of felt like this crazy moment where all of a sudden the show paused and sort of turned into something that was a little more poetic and a little more pure. And there were these like huge like China silk sails that came down, and ropes, and all of this sort of like water sea imagery, which felt really shocking and different from anything else in the show. And I,
Mhm.
I remember it so vividly. And whenever I hear the song, I do kind of think of that staging. I think of Jeremy with ropes
Yeah.
always, like ropes around his arm.
Well, it was totally scrappy in all the ways you said. When I first asked this question, I was like picturing like a giant boat, like in my brain. And I think maybe it's
Hmm.
because I always sat near the front of the audience.
Yeah.
It felt like a very large, like they're actually building like, the sails of a boat. It felt very big in that moment.
Yeah. Well, also it's like because that theater is so small, the scenic swipe of having like a huge sort of silk that went up to the grid, it felt humongous. It would be like the equivalent of like if you're in like the Majestic and there's like a
Mhm.
40-foot, bigger than a 40-foot.
Chandelier.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Or a helicopter at the Broadway. But it's like it felt that huge because the
Mhm.
space was so small, and it felt really all encompassing, in a way that I think is appropriate for the song.
Yeah. It's also a very beautiful moment on the album because Last on Land is immediately preceded by Find the Bastard, which is, Eric and the whole, gang. It's like a large amount of people on the album who participated in Find the Bastard. And then Last on Land is actually the original cast of Blood Song of Love singing on the album, just like, the original four black suits were on one of the tracks. So, what was it like gathering the six original cast members for Last on Land to sing it on the album?
It was really, really amazing. The Blood Song of Love cast members, we've certainly had occasion to be with each other since Blood Song of Love closed, but it had been a really long time we all since all of us were in the same room. It's like we'd been with each other in different iterations in different groups, but I think that was the first time in a very long time that all six of them plus me were there together. And certainly it was the first time since 2010 that all six of them were singing that song from the show. And just like the fact that it was us being together for the first time in so long, and it was us being together for the first time since COVID had started. It was um, a really moving experience, and I am so grateful for if the album did nothing else for me than make this recording of Last on Land happen with those six people, it would have been a success for me. Like it was just incredible. And then, and like obviously like Tepper, you were such a huge part of Blood Song of Love. And I feel like that's where like the two of us really like first, collaborated in a meaningful way. Um to have you there and Ian, and it was really really something truly
Yeah.
special.
It was very special. Would you like to put to rest or would you like to not put to rest the fan question about the lyric, which is not just a fan question, it's a family question too, I think. Don't know if the lore is worth the cost at hand, if the word is lure or lore, because that is my favorite question that fans ask.
The I didn't even realize that that was like a full fast fan question.
Oh, it's I feel like the lyrics have been printed somewhere now, so maybe it's not anymore, but I just remember people like, "Does it mean this or that?" And I don't know, it was like one of those fun, like, it could mean two slightly different things, just like
It's
Blood Song.
yeah, I do. I mean, I do think that it means two slightly different things. So I'm not gonna make a judgment call. And now I'm worried about which one is printed in the lyric book. But it's one of those things that I like the idea of it being heard two ways because it works both ways.
Yeah.
It means all things.
Yeah,
You know, I keep
I
you
looked
know
it
there's
up, so I know which one is in the written version right now.
okay. Whatever it is, that's whatever's in the written version is what I intended. I will stand behind whatever is in the written version. But it's so funny with some of these things that have existed for so long, where it's like I'm intentionally choosing words that sound like other words, because then I sort of like forget the initial impulse behind them. But there's another one in in this song that always makes me laugh, because there's all of this like sea maritime imagery. um the line "we provide the soul," in my mind I always think of like soul as like
A
fish, which is
fish.
really not intentional. It's like I don't want people to be thinking of fish in that moment, but I do always think like, oh man, maybe I should have chose a different word that wasn't
Now you've
soul.
you've asked for this to happen. People at 54 Below in the audience are gonna hold up their fish on that line. It'll become like a thing.
I know that feels like that has the potential to one day be the ultimate Rocky Horror moment where people throw fish on that line.
I will say that related to the lure, I'm not even saying it clearly enough. An O or a U. I
Yeah,
did hear a couple years ago, years after Blood Song of Love, but years before this album, two Blood Song original cast members, and I won't say who, each who thought it was a different one, which was what stuck this in my head. And I didn't participate in the conversation. So
I love the mystery. I fully support the mystery of anything like that. You know, it's the lore of it all.
yeah. Also, so much of this song has like different meanings intentionally, and that one might have been slightly less intentional, but it's just become part of it.
Yeah, fully support.
Is there anything you want to say about this track musically, like in terms of the instrumentation or the band, or just realizing it for an album in this way?
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about putting this on the album, I got really excited about having it be performed with a choir. That was I feel like this was probably the song that I was like, oh, this is where what I want to choir on, and then Haddonfield kind of like came out of that, but or Haddonfield came next, but y- I knew I wanted like a proper choir arrangement, and like Haddonfield, I turned to Joel Wagner to do the arrangement. And honestly, when he first, sent me something and I saw what he did, I was like, I don't know if this is correct for the song. Usually with things like vocal arrangements, I try to do the simplest thing possible. I tend to not like musical theater songs where I feel like they're overly vocally arranged in a way that feels like it gets in the way of the meaning of the song, or it gets in the way of the melody or the lyrics. But when I heard his arrangement, like from start to finish, I just immediately felt like, oh, this makes the song sound more like itself. Like it was like he heard something in the song that he connected with, and so his arrangement, I love so deeply, and I just think it's completely in tune with the the underlying themes and passion of of the song itself. And now whenever I hear the song, or whenever I play the song, I hear that arrangement in it. And so I really love that. And then the instrumental track underneath, it's, Matt Hinckley plays on it, who is the original MD of Blood Song of Love. And it's funny. It's like the song sounds a lot bigger than it actually is. Like the actual instrumentation is pretty basic. Like it's pretty much like just sort of like the core rock band underneath, and then it's the choir, it's the voices that add the hugeness to it. It certainly is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, songs on the album, and I love that it's so big because of voices, because of like people lending their voice to the track. It's not instruments or computers or anything like that. And I'm really proud of the choir, the way the choir sounds, because they sound great, but I think they also sound human. It's not like auto-tuned or pitch corrected within an inch of its life in a way that many current group singing on albums, whether they're theater albums or certainly pop albums. They're heavily auto-tuned, they're heavily pitch corrected. It's just the sound of like contemporary music. I just happen to hate it, and I think it will age so poorly. But that's that's my own thing. But I really am proud that the people singing sound like actual people. Yeah, and it's like it's not that it doesn't sound like you're in a theater hearing it live, but it's like getting there. It feels like you're in a room
Yeah.
with actual people, and they're
Yeah.
singing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else about Last on Land?
I remember knowing that I wanted to write this song for this moment in the show, and at the time I was living in Herald Square on 34th Street in my apartment. That's the apartment that, when we think of Jeff, we think of that apartment. And I remember wandering around on the East Side in the 30s, and listening to there's this band I love called The Hold Steady, and they have an album called Boys and Girls in America, and the album could not sound more different from Last on Land. But for some reason, I was just listening to that album over and over again, and in walking around and thinking about the moment, I came up with this idea. And I've listened to that album so many times since, trying to listen for like a kernel or something, because there are like songs that I've written that I have that have been born out of like a kernel or an idea, or like a 1 second moment from another song. And usually it's like something that only I would know, that like triggered something in my brain. And I anytime I listen to the Hold Steady album, I try to I think about walking around in the East 30s and what was it that made me think of oh, heave ho, I'll never last on land. And I have not been able to pinpoint it, but I really think it's more about a feeling than a specific idea, And I think the song sounds like that. The song sounds like a feeling, even though it's really, it's written like a Shel Silverstein poem. It's like really sort of exact, and it's, the way the rhymes are, it's really tidy as a song. But I think it evokes the feeling, and certainly evokes the feeling that I was experiencing at that time when I was, for the first time working with this family of artists. And it was the first time it really felt like a real thing. And it felt like so much was on the horizon, and there was so much at stake and so much to lose. And I think the song captures that, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. I love that. I never knew a lot of that. So
yeah.
Wow. All right. Last on Land.
Last on Land.
Last on, never last on.
And I don't know where I'd be if you weren't here with me. And I don't know.
Hey, thanks so much for listening or watching to my podcast. Do me a favor and go to wherever you just listen to or watch this thing and subscribe or like or give us a great rating or review, and then head to bpn.fm/album to find out even more information about this podcast, more ways to watch, more ways to listen, and check out my album. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Album Podcast is executive produced by Liz Armstrong, produced by Dory Berenstein, Alan Seals, Kim Garris, and the rest of the team at the Broadway Podcast Network. Be sure to visit bpn.fm/album for both audio and video versions of this podcast and to listen to Album.
If I didn't have you,